Hi, good evening. My name is Kerm Zaman. I'm the CEO of Fifth Tribe, and I'd like to welcome you to the Campfire Fireside Chat podcast. Tonight's guest is Christopher King. He's the CEO and founder of We Are Marcus.
Good evening, everyone. Christopher King here, founder and CEO of We Are Marcus. Excited about the conversation today.
Thank you. We have a live audience here out of 7076 in Crystal City. So I'll be taking questions online. You can go to Fifth Tribe on Twitter and submit your questions there. Or you can submit your questions live through our YouTube channel as well. All right. So with that, we can go ahead and get started. Thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. So I guess we could start by just talking a little about yourself. You've accomplished a lot. You're very young. It's a very impressive list of achievements. And so I just wanted to kind of go through some of them and talk a little bit about where you've been. So number one is that We Are Marcus. Can you tell us a little bit about the app and the brand and what that sort of represents?
Sure. We exist to close the mentoring gap. Our big pie in the sky goal is to cut the mentoring gap, which is currently 16 million missing mentors throughout the country, in half by 2025. We want to connect the stories of professional Black men with varied occupations, not just white collar, directly to students, middle school and high school youth throughout the country, ideally in 7th to 11th grade. We've also seen early success with pre-freshmen going into the formative years where students are trying to navigate what they ultimately want to do with their time, and showing them the connection between those stories of what people have actually done it, role models, right? That role model nourishment, and we can measure the progress by using data and AI and machine learning to evaluate student growth on social emotional learning. And we're excited about what the possibilities are with that and the various mediums in which we can leverage. Right now, it's in a platform solution we call WAM Pro. So We Are Marcus is the parent company, and WAM Pro is the product that we deploy to schools and enrichment programs.
Great. Can you tell us a little bit about how it works? So this is is it a website or mobile application?
Sure. Yeah, it's mobile friendly, but it's available mostly on laptops and desktops for now. We also have students in terms of whole group engagement, view it through a smart board, right? Like a projection in a classroom. And in terms of how it works is, you can find this on wearemarcus.com, everything I'm about to say, sort of the 1 through 5, how we engage with the product. We have an activation conversation with the facilitators, so it's a train-the-trainer model. And then from there, students log on to the interface, they watch the video, listen to it. It's a curated content with what we have in terms of our speakers. We call them digital mentors, and they tell their story. That's designed for student engagement from 60 seconds to about 2 minutes, where we break up topics, right? So strengths and areas of development, or knowing themselves, or self-confidence. And we have students respond to that and type right into the platform after they've listened to a speaker. And we're able to close that mentoring gap right there in that moment, whether it's in school or out of school time. And the power of that, with so many organizations and school leaders have told us, which is, we don't know how to measure this experience. And digital mentoring, essentially, people have been doing that for a while, and online education has been around for a while. What we found is that culturally competent and culturally sensitive material has not. Topics that students want to hear about, that they're dealing with in their personal life, has not been the force of those organizations, and that's what We Are Marcus is all about.
Can you give an example of some cultural sensitivity?
Yeah. Also, you can find
these challenges that they're facing?
Definitely. And you can find that on our website. There's a demo chapter there. And honestly, our speakers tell it better than I do, which I think is the most powerful piece in engaging everyone's voices. But my personal story is being, raised in a single mother household for a short time there on public assistance, and I was told very clearly that I would never attend a 4-year university. My high school guidance counselor.
Wow.
In my advisement meeting, right? And here we are today doing podcasts and 2 graduate degrees.
I hope you didn't make a bet on that, because you lost pretty badly.
I had a chip on my shoulder, and I wanted to send my college degree back to my guidance counselor, say, hey, now you know what time it is, right? Because I knew, but she didn't know. Mm-hmm. And what I continually find is I talk to, whether it's philanthropy organizations or people who work in mass incarceration and prison settings, or or in sort of STEM engagement camps, is that students are consistently saying, I don't feel like I belong here, and I might not want to seek help because and this narrative got struck me today. I don't want to seek help because I don't want to feel like the dumb black or brown kid, right?
Powerful.
And if you go to our website, you'll see the demo chapter up there to answer your question in a different way. One of our most powerful speakers, Richard Smith, talks about how school was a traumatic experience for him.
Wow.
And he ended up in a setting where he started to act out, made some choices he regretted, and ended up in the juvenile justice system. He was able to leverage that experience and being advised this by his grandmother, who came to visit him. And she said, you need to leverage this like it's university. He was like 13. So he's like, what? and she that relationship meant a lot to him. And he trusted her. So he did do it, right? He went out and he sought out more resources. And now he went on to honors programs and then a PhD, right? The arc of these stories doesn't appear on the front page of most periodicals nowadays, right? Because our voices are not there. But as inspiring as that is, the product leverages what we don't know now, or up until this point, is how students grow over time by being impacted by those stories. So the social emotional learning frameworks that have been sort of in the ivory towers and deployed at various moments without the cultural component, we insert the Richard Smith so that he can have impact across the country in a way that is not confined to whether or not I can make it to a school in Oakland or Richard can go to Chicago next week. All those barriers around cost, as a founder who's not limited by the restrictions of today, thinking, what if we can imagine reducing the barriers of cost and reducing the barriers of imagination, and we can get to a point where we can leverage data and tech and platforms and create super engaging content and super engaging experiences that also tell our story around our growth in this country. And we'll talk about it a bit later, but I also believe that these analytics and these reports are what's going to define the future of work. We're more than a resume, and we're going to have some quantitative pieces and reports that precede us walking into a room that is really going to be powerful in terms of who gets what roles and who's in what influence in spaces.
So I think your app and your platform, it's coming at the right time, right? And I think that the nation as a whole is having a conversation about diversity in tech. And it's not just something, I think in corporations, there's this idea that we need to talk about diversity, and it's a very tokenized conversation. But I think the macro level implications of diversity in technology is important, right? What we just saw an article that came out yesterday in the New York Times about Stuyvesant High School, one of the best high schools in the country, only had 7 African-American males out of a number, I think it was 800 something, 895 spots, right? So that happens so early on at the high school level. And you have sort of this access to, these networks that you develop in high school, they go into college, they go into your workforce. So that's a major disadvantage at that level. And, in the tech community, which I think the tech community is kind of seen as this very progressive force, is trying to drive change. But in reality, technology companies are dealing with major issues of diversity. Last November, the partnership managers at Facebook quit. And he wrote a memo and he said that Facebook is failing its Black employees and its Black users. And, we see this in areas like artificial intelligence when it comes to things like finance, where people are being denied loans because the AI algorithms are automatically classifying people of color in a discriminatory manner. Or we're seeing that with law enforcement, where now we're using these massive facial recognition technologies, and people of color are extremely disadvantaged of it, and it's misclassifying. Even in driverless cars, we're seeing that driverless cars can't classify people of color really well. And so, it's just so you're looking at the implications of the macro level, where you're talking about finance, like home finance, education. I mean, those are major disadvantages. And we know, for example, in America, the average white family has 86 times more wealth than an average African American family. So these are not just it's these racial inequalities in technology, they aggravate the economic inequalities as well. So the best way to solve that seems to be to increase diversity in technology, but it doesn't seem like anybody's really figured out. Like Facebook, you would think is one of the foremost countries they've got these very progressive policies. Yeah. So your technology, your platform seems to be coming sort of at the right time.
Absolutely. And the other data point that I think is interesting there is my experience as a founding year teacher in Brooklyn. We often talked about the 30 million word gap. So the students who actually approach a classroom have access to 30 million more words coming from a middle income or upper income scenario at home, and versus students who don't, right? And that to me was, in my experience, it was my grandmother was an immigrant from Cayman and Jamaica, and she was a teacher. So she taught me how to read with using the Bible at home at 3.5 years old. And that's part of the reason why I have a love for just knowledge, and I'm trying to suck up information all the time because my grandmother was there doing that. It had nothing to do with income. It just happened to do with the culture and the background that I came from. And I felt very spoiled, right? I felt like I have access to something that students that I knew coming into my classroom didn't understand the difference between a letter and a number. Incredible to me, where I could put a book in front of a student and they'd say, "Oh, that's A," and the number was a 4, right? And unpacking that from the pipeline, there's a very much a pipeline issue going on here, and then there's also another thing that I'd like to say about my experience in Silicon Valley at Intel. But all that in terms of taking personal responsibility is what I've done. I don't. I am the type of person that has continually looked at it and said, all right, we're gonna continue to complain about these things, or we're gonna start workshopping solutions and get to the point where we're iterating, tightening the feedback loop, and letting people into our space and saying, I have this great idea, can you help me figure it out? And the vast majority of people that I've talked to have said they want to. The next level is capacity and managing the talents of the people around me. But that's kind of how my perspective on some of the data pieces you've offered. The Intel piece, I think that's important for me to talk about because I went to Silicon Valley. So as I said, I have this amazing experience pursuing an MBA, and all the recruitment is happening, and the one that kind of stood out was the tech company. I had already started my way, and the other thing that's important to mention is that I didn't have a tech. I'm a non-technical founder. I started this idea and started to broaden the tent and say, who can help me build it? And that was a year before business school even happened. I get there and I'm thinking to myself, I don't have tech experience. I need to give myself tech experience. I couldn't wait for somebody else to put me on at a tech company. As my background was in activism and policy. There was no reason for somebody to pay me, 6 figures to be at a tech company.
How did you break into Intel?
My story was actually really powerful in terms of creating We Are Marcus to people who worked at Intel. The gall and the bravery that I had around creating this product and then having it be functional and sitting down and saying, look at it, it works, right? It's something that I envisioned and I put it on paper and then we turned it into technology. That struck them as, wait, this is what we're trying to do. Very impressive to the people that I interviewed with. And some of them happened to, have a relationship with Howard. So the HBCU piece was helpful that they would even give me a look.
That's awesome.
And then I ended up in the corporate affairs group advising them on character analytics.
Did you find them or did they find you?
I found them in a setting. Yeah, at a conference.
So how long is when did you start We Are Marcus then?
We Are Marcus was started, the brain dump was started in late 2015. The incorporation started in 2016.
Great. And you've come so far so quickly. So just recently, this is where I met you, was at 7076 in DC.
Yeah.
And you're one of the 10 companies that had been selected of 150 applicants in their first Accelerator cohort here in DC. And so I met you there, and we got to hit it off. And I was like, all right, we gotta get together. So that was really cool seeing you there. you were featured in Black Enterprise as a social innovator to watch. You were recognized by the VC firm Village Capital for your social impact acumen, and you were in their Capital Pathways cohort. You've accomplished so much. So I'm trying to like get it all here. And recently, I think it was it last month, you got your team got an award from the National Institute of Health.
Yeah.
For the pseudo program. So do you want to talk a little bit about this? First of all,
Yeah,
congratulations.
thank you. And I want to for our live audience is going to be sort of annoying in terms of my self-promotion.
The goal here is to get everyone to sign up for his app, right? This is a very not so subtle marketing ploy, right? So we'll flash the wearemarkets.com at the, like those.
It's actually like completely uncomfortable for me to read that bio. Because I'm so like, hey guys, just check it out on LinkedIn, like dudes. But on March 29th, we're having a Black Men Talk Tech event. It's called Black Men Talk Tech. And it's a series of events that we're putting together to broaden the tent and make sure that people are engaging in our voices across our experiences. And that's what We Are Marcus is really about, to leverage the voices of the community around us and continue to build community.
Where's that going to be?
That's going to be, thank you, at Google DC on 25 Mass Ave, Suite 900. Please check the Eventbrite right now. The seats are filling up extremely fast. The original date was February 20th. Was snowed out. We had a blizzard here in DC. So now we're going back and we're not giving up. We're going to be there at 329, and we're looking to do these events quarterly. So continue to follow We Are Marcus on IG at We Are Marcus, and on Twitter at We Are Marcus1, myself at King Chris 365. To your question about National Institute of Health, we were through the 1776 demo day. We were approached by a bunch of opportunities, including NIH, which is specifically interested in substance abuse outcomes. The hot button issue in this country right now is opioids, vaping, and what has been legal in a variety of places, marijuana addiction, right? And our online mentoring, our proposal was accepted by NIH for their startup challenge. So they have this awesome challenge on challenge.gov is where you can find it if you're a startup founder, and look for their application. The cool thing about this program is that a lot of people try to get resources from the government and do government contracting with their variety of skill sets, and they don't know how to approach that process. And it's unwieldy, and people, they have a 70% fail rate. So they essentially can look at who's on your team initially and understand whether or not you're going to fail. And in many ways, they put a criteria together and a scoring mechanism to sort out up front, depending on what agency you're going after. If you don't have the core components of what it looks like to have a successful proposal, then you're going to get shot down. And what we did was we were able to construct our proposal in a way that we knew, and this is a sort of startup challenge, so it's just, the beginning phase of a 10K investment that then leads to a September deadline of phase one application, which is 100K to $250,000. And then, thank you. And we were excited to be top 10 in that, and we're off to the races in terms of constructing our team for early indicators of proving reduction in those three categories, so that opioids, marijuana, and vaping. So we're ecstatic about what that looks like on our website, wearemarcus.com. We just recently had a number of schools to submit. We're extending that. We're excited to have other organizations input their information on the apply here. We've seen early indicators of success on behavior management reduction, and also attendance improvements in the clients that we worked with. So we're expanding that now to talk specifically about whether or not we can improve this aspect as per the NIH interest, and we're also recruiting research consultants and folks who can monitor in an unbiased fashion and have already had experience doing research grants with federal agencies in particular.
That's awesome. So again, congratulations on that. So you got quite a bit of things that you've accomplished. Is there I'm not sure if I'm missing anything.
It's really tough for
this is a long list. Yeah.
Congratulations.
Yeah. I think it's important because I think what happens is like as a startup founder, you have like imposter syndrome a lot of the times, and you're just like, for me especially, like I've been doing this for 7 years.
Well
so it's
said.
like you're just like, oh man, it's not about me. But it's very important to get your story out there.
Yeah.
Because now people can look back at your achievements and what you've done and say, oh, I can go here to this program and apply for it, and I can go here and go to that program and apply for it.
Yeah.
And I've done quite a few mentorship programs, and what I've noticed is that just encouraging people to apply, it boosts their self-esteem and they believe in themselves. And there was a lady I was mentoring for a competition. She ended up not getting in. She didn't even get nominated to present. But what had happened was with her was, I was sitting down with her. I was like, how's everything going? And she was like, oh, I was going to end my startup. But she's like, but then somebody anonymously nominated me for this challenge competition, and I didn't get in, but it made me feel like somebody believed in me. And so that kickstarted her to kind of give it a shot again. She ended up closing a contract, and it was a pretty big deal. So just like at the right time, at the right place, like having a person just believe in you and have a little bit of mentorship, like it's incredible what you can do.
Yeah.
And in professional development, in startup space especially, it's a lot of it's about your network, like meeting investors, pulling a team together. And so what's interesting about your app is that network effect. You're really filling an important need in that space.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And that's why, I do want to mention as well that we should look to us as to be featured on the mentoring platform, be a speaker. We want that, particularly from Black men, because per the data that you kicked earlier, there's a shortage of seeing us in school settings, and many will tell you in school settings and classroom settings that a lot of that is actually intentional. They don't want diversity from the same population that gets pulled over, incarcerated, tracked from school to prison pipeline, or tracked to special needs settings, or myself being told very clearly, this is good enough for you. High school, community college is good enough for you, right? And that, it stirs me up, right? I can't stop being passionate about that. But to your point earlier about building the village, you're humble as usual. I mean, Karam talked to me offline a couple months ago about, I picked his brain about being a contributor, right? To feature my voice and how you position yourself to be, writing for Forbes regularly. And I think as much as we have these opportunities to be, I say, hey, come and go to our Instagram and be a featured speaker and drop us a line. A lot of times it's up to the person to say, hey, I need some help. I want to figure out how to do more things. I shouldn't leave this space without a couple people coming up to me afterwards and saying, how did you get involved in that particular thing you did, right? And it may not be that you can get advice from everybody about everything, but if you have a particular interest and you've got a direction you want to go in, come out to #BlackMenTalkTech, meet people there, talk to them about where they've positioned themselves, seek mentorship as much as mentorship is being provided to you. And that's regularly, I think, something that people should revisit.
Yeah, that's great. So let's talk about school districts. So on the one hand, you have mentors. So everybody here again, pledge to sign up as soon as you do it right now, right? You can go on the website and do it. Mm-hmm. The second thing is also school districts. And why should a school district sign up for this?
Yeah, a school district should sign up for We Are Marcus for two very key reasons, right? Data, character development, input, and progress on the students that are either at risk or high achieving, right? Understanding what areas where we can support them better and aggressively feed career pipelines, whether that's college or other options. And the second piece is understanding that in 50 plus years of this achievement gap conversation, the Coleman Report issued a study in 1963 on students' progress in ELA and math. And they found that 17% of students were achieving at a high level, or grade level and above, 17%, right? And 50 years later, they commissioned that study again, so around 2013, and the progress was about 18%.
Wow.
And so the achievement gap conversation continues to hit hard for schools who their ROI and their day-to-day, their every single all-consuming purpose is to make sure that students are prepared for the next step. And if you're looking at Black and brown youth, particularly Black and brown boys, you can fact check and do whatever research in terms of what marginal progress we've had. But if you look at these data points, I think we can all admit that we're not doing enough. You can give me anecdotal feedback about what your school is doing, and I'm happy to support that work. I do not contest that We Are Marcus is a silver bullet solution. I'm not saying you plug in We Are Marcus and you plug out data in, data out. This is great. What I am saying is that we need to figure out how innovation plays a critical role in your day-to-day. And if I'm the other major corporations that are vested in the putting products in front of kids are iterating, we should be iterating too. We should be figuring out how to tighten our feedback loops again, try new things, and invest in platforms that are positioning themselves as on message, right? Culturally competent, relating to students, using design thinking about what students want to hear, and also how to create an engaging space that moves the needle towards progress.
Yeah, especially in the education sector, because so much of education in America is tied to property taxes, right? And so the school that you go to, the quality of your education, and it depends on where you live, what zip code you're at. And a lot of that happens in the 50s, right? When everybody was living in cities, and then you had white flight where everybody moved to the suburbs. And so then you have this huge disparity sort of in the educational in the educational sphere that today still hasn't been fixed. I grew up in New York, and New York is like one of the most diverse places in the country, where there's like languages everywhere.
Right.
You can just like walk down the street in our neighborhood. It's just like very diverse. When I moved to Maryland, I got in a lot of trouble. I got into a lot of fights, and it was very hard for me to adjust.
Yeah.
Like in New York, if you see somebody looking at you, they're trying to start something. So I got like everybody in Maryland was like very friendly, and I would just start picking fights with people. Like, what are you smiling at?
I'm from New York too.
Yeah, so it was like it's just a different culture. But I had like culture shock when I moved here.
Yeah.
And I went to a high school where there was basically like almost like no people of color. And then from there I went to UMBC, which again had a lot of diversity. And my business partner and Asaf, we met in our sophomore year, and we ended up creating Fifth Tribe out of our college experiences. But we ended up relying on our networks that we had, and in the educational sphere, you see this incredible diversity or lack of diversity. When I went to UBC, our president was Freeman Rabowski, who I'm not sure if everybody knows who he is, but he's like a pioneer in education. And he made UMBC a place for very STEM oriented, and it was very focused on attracting people of color. And I felt welcome, and I felt like I could build up my confidence. And I did a lot of crazy projects. I was an activist,
Yeah.
And all those skills that I was doing, where I had to do that, ended up helping me becoming an entrepreneur.
Mm.
And the people that we hired, like a lot of those relationships were forwarded in college, and so that mentorship role, I think, is really critical. It's something that's very important. So education is where a lot of that disparity happens, and so your tool kind of comes in and is really able to build it through. So
well, quick plug to my mentor. Actually, I'll be remiss if I didn't mention him. I usually do this more early in the conversation. He in my freshman year of undergrad, right, I got out of that situation where I was advised by my high school guidance counselor not to pursue it. Ended up being admitted to the University of Albany. Found my major in public policy. But in that moment of figuring that out, I was wasting time. I was wasting time every day. Back then, when you could. When music videos were like really pushing, and you could always pull up a music video. I mean, kids still watch them now, but this is 03, 04. So, did you see that video? Was part of conversation amongst classmates. And my mentor his famous line at the time that I'll never forget: "Stop watching music videos, start to read the New York Times." Wow.
How old were you?
Pivot.
Like
I was 17.
Wow.
So that grandmother taught me how to read, ended up skipping me along. So I went to first grade instead of early ed. And from there, I was always the youngest. But my friend circle was always older than me, and I was trying to level up socially with them. So I kind of lost my way. I wasn't really doing the things that, were kind of native to my skill set, understanding my strengths, right? Strengths finders and Myers-Briggs, and just understanding like where I was in all of the mix in this major campus of 10,000 undergrads, 15,000 all in with grads. It's just a massive world of trying to figure things out. And I used to play a fun game because I came from a small town where I was on this campus, and I got out of my box with the help of that mentor. Said like, hey, you should do this, you should do that. And I would just talk to people. Anybody who looked at me more than once, I would talk to them.
We had very different experiences looking at
silly time, but fun game that I played. And then I would go back and I would just get more information. I was reading things that my mentor would just feed me information to say. He would literally just drop me a couple articles every day. Oh, did you see this? Did you see this? Did you see this? And to this day, I'll share articles back to him, and he'll say, "Yeah, I've seen that already." But that affected that mentor very much. Led me to understand that maybe 6 or 7 years later, and I still talk to him today. But he reached a critical moment, which he told me that you're the last one. And that was actually heartbreaking to me, even though it was a compliment to the relationship that we had. His understanding at that time, and he's retired. He just recently retired. He didn't ever have time to hang out with kids. That's not his interest. He was interested in paying it forward and building what we used to joke about called the Leadership Institute. Right? We were in a relationship in which he was pushing me to be more than I had seen in myself. And a lot of people in my peer group now, occasionally mention this idea that somebody's going to see something in you that you don't see in yourself. And for me to be the last one helped me think about, well, why, right? I actually got really upset. Why do I have to be the last one, right? But knowing that the people that I grew up with in my immediate circle had either been arrested or fallen into some stuff that they shouldn't have. And a couple of those guys, one guy who happens to be on my team now, Jamel Mosley, he was told that he would not, pursue college. He had a 93 average, went on to go to RPI as an engineer. Wow. Total. I was about to curse, but I didn't. Total rock star. And he's a creative director, and he actually had a relationship with my mentor as well. So kind of all of that coming out of just some guys, how we met was sitting out at one of my friends and I, his big brother was my soon-to-be mentor, and we were talking about the Louvre. I had the privilege of playing basketball in Europe for a couple of weeks and did some museum touring, and he started talking about the Louvre, and I was geeking out about the Louvre. What do you think? A couple of black guys in the suburbs talking about Paris. Far before Jay-Z starts rapping. Right? So I think that the power of that quick anecdote as well is the diversity of our lives. You wouldn't think that we have those experiences, but we do. And they're not being portrayed in media, and they're not being portrayed in the average mentoring conversation or experience. But kids have these things, and we don't know about them, and adults have these things, and we don't know about them. How do we bridge that divide? And that's what I'm invested in.
That's awesome. So let me ask you a question about this idea of a platform, because many people that do mentorship networks. And for me, what I struggle with is I find job opportunities every day. I find startup challenges and competitions, and I'm always like sharing it on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn. And I was like, man, I wish I had a platform where I could just like send it to everybody that is interested in that.
Yeah.
And you're 10 steps ahead, and you've thought of a platform. So how did you go from, hey, I have a mentor, mentorship is important? How did that idea of a platform come to you?
Yeah.
You said this was pre-Intel, so you said you had the idea already kind of in your head, and then you sort of fleshed it out. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah.
This is like a shower moment where you're just like, I should build a platform,
Well, as there's a lot of sort of neuroscientists. There's one guy, Jim Quick, I was watching recently, who talked about how your dreams are so important. Your sleep is important. You wake up, you record what you dreamt about, and I regularly solve problems while I'm sleeping. Gift and a curse, right? Sometimes sleep can be rocky if you're like, oh, I've figured out the next phase of my product, which happened last night. But platform, if you're listening to this and you're thinking about whether or not to be a founder, this is intriguing. I didn't want to be in the app business, right? Everybody has an app. And everybody's figuring out how to download something, and then the measure is how many downloads, then how many monthly active users, then becomes revenue for ads, right? And I'm like, social impact. I want to bottle up the conversations that I've been privy to with my mentor to other people, and I want to duplicate and replicate the process 1,000 times and then 1,000,000 times, and that's where the platform. And me thinking about the self-awareness that I'm in my phone. What am I doing, right? How am I accessing it? And then that got me to think about, being exposed to things like design thinking before I knew it was design thinking. And the platform interface made a lot of sense with, and I'll be fully candid with everybody here about my process in terms of tech. Hired a developer who, one of my random brainstorms that I decided to invest in was having the platform be downloadable, but not from an app store, but from a website where you could just download the file. And then I was like, well, if it's native to your desktop, then you're always going to see it. So, Bill Gates had the Microsoft Office suite. That W is painted in my mind. I will never forget the W on my laptop. So I thought of it like, what if it's an M? And what if it's Marcus? And what if every time the kids go in, because they go in a computer lab and they see the M and they've got, 10, 15 minutes when they want to space out, they're talking and having a conversation with the mentor that I was privy to. Super bold and interesting at the time. Lots of bugs in terms of making that happen on a $2,000 budget is what I invested in.
Incredible. That's amazing.
Well, yeah, it was. We had a developer who worked on that. If he's listening, it'll be interesting. Didn't work out in terms of what it was pulled to do, and then the UX behind that. Shout out to Yemi over at Civic Eagle. She was the first person to do the wireframes with me in Brooklyn. Went on to be a co-founder backed by Backstage Capital, and is in Techstars right now.
Great.
So talent is everywhere. And hashtag or shout out to Black Girl Magic too, because she's dope, and we're getting the Black Boy Joy right behind it. So putting that together, that was an exciting and interesting experience, and I was super happy about it, and it actually brought me to tears when I first listened to it. When you have that moment where you've envisioned something and then it comes real.
It's exciting.
Yeah, and from there we've done a bunch of iterations, and if you go to wearemarcus.com, you'll see the single sign-on solution that we created that allows a user to do all the things that we used to have in different places is now smashed together with secret sauce all throughout, right? You can go through the gallery of speakers and see, instead of what we used to have as a speaker first, is now the topic first. So we learned that from our users, that people don't know who the mentor is. So maybe we should talk about the topic first, right? Big for the facilitator and the user. And then after that, we had a takeaway message in a PDF. And then we had it on the top of the screen. And now we have it down right near the question prompt. So all these intricacies of the features, right? We could be super features driven when we think of our ideas. Here's what it's going to do. Here's how it's going to look. And here's how it's going to, well, that's cool with butcher paper in your room in your apartment in Brooklyn, where I was, right, 3 years ago. And now we've done so many whiteboarding sessions and then put the product in front of people and of all stages, stakeholders, students, get feedback on topics, got feedback on how it should look and feel, and what the click-through process should be like. And now we're at the point where we're talking about analytics. Prior to that, it was just what content are we going to distribute? And we are in a content-driven era on our platforms that exist from the major companies that have developed those. But they have an edge on the data. They have an edge on the analytics. And if you don't have an ownership mentality, you're not thinking as much about how is this data being used and what can we do with all the possibilities. That's our tech evolution, and that's where we are today in thinking about character report cards and social emotional learning, quantitative scores versus qualitative information, and how we can relay that in a way that affects how each student is being evaluated in their school, in addition to how many times they've been absent or how many times they've had behavior management referrals, which are mostly deficit model attributes. And we, just like my mentor would have a lot of positive things to say about his experience with me, I have a running roll of the negatives in my head, right? I'm always thinking, oh, he just corrected me. I got to work on being on time. I got to work on, my sentence structure, my writing, which you got to give me a lot of feedback. That's one piece of it. We need multiple data points to evaluate an individual's progress, and that's what We Are Marcus is in the business of doing, is to add to it and make it a more full story around a student or an opportunity youth or a pre-freshman undergrad.
And so you have this incredible experience with user experience design and prototyping. And I think you taught a class at the inclusivity incubator at Howard.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk a little bit about that? And then we'll open it up to the audiences for people to ask questions.
Yeah. And Aaron Saunders, shout out to Aaron Saunders as well, who has been involved in planning the hashtag Black Men Talk Tech event on March 29th at 6 o'clock. Aaron, when Aaron opened the IN3 Center, he envisioned it as a space for classroom engagement and inclusivity around tech and development. And his company, Clearly Innovative, backed by the mayor's office, actually, the Office of Chief Technology, engaged in co-sponsoring a youth engagement where we taught 15 high school students entrepreneurship and prototyping. So with the hard technical skill of coding to develop prototypes to demo their ideas. And I zoned in on some of the stuff that I'd learned in my MBA program around some of the financial due diligence that they would have to engage in, some of the the idea iteration that they would have to undergo, what that would look like to workshop what they're doing versus figuring out what a competitive matrix is. I did not, as you can tell, I talked to them at the level of you're going to be pitching in Silicon Valley in 3 years or in DC in the angel investment community. And I need you to understand how to put together a full deck that is going to be representative of what you bring to the table, what value your product brings. And I didn't talk down to them at all. No, I envisioned, I think you.
So you went big.
Yeah.
You're going to pitch at Silicon Valley.
I mean, the tighter narrative of that story is they had an idea, and then at the end of 10 weeks, they were going to pitch in front of their friends and family, as well as judges from the community, professionals who were engaged in tech, and I believe they had some prizes that were sponsored by the mayor's office and the incubator, and we had high school students from area high schools, McKinley Tech and Thurgood Marshall and other schools.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So again, there's a local ecosystem here that some people may be aware of, some of them might not be aware of. And so these are like networks that are online and offline. We can plug into them and start helping create opportunities. So with that said, I'll go ahead and open the floor up to questions. People can just raise their hand and go ahead and just say your name and name your question. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Lindsay, and thank you, Chris. This has been interesting. I have 2 questions. First, I'm curious about the origin behind the name We Are Marcus. Who is Marcus? And 2, have you all identified whether or not there's a tipping point at which, when the students are engaging with the platform, where teachers or even with their engagement, that their curiosity is being piqued, or that there's been some shift in their mind frame?
Great question. Great questions. So first, We Are Marcus, right? We Are is the movement. Understanding that as much as people want to say, every once in a while they'll joke and say, or mislabel and say, I am Marcus, which I think is awesome, right? The idea was to find a name that would be sticky, to connect us to our shared experiences. I was specifically told also in undergrad that I couldn't connect with kids from New York City because of where I grew up. I was interviewing for a mentoring role, and they said, what's your hook? I said, listening. They were like, wait, what do you mean? I was like, well, you listen, right? Like, people have shared experiences, and if you ask them questions and let them talk about what they've gone through, then they'll stick to a couple of narratives and themes that I also share, and we can have conversation about that. I wanted to name that dynamic. I wanted to name the youth and the mentor at the same time. We came up with Marcus, which coincidentally has ties to Marcus Garvey and self-determination and other pieces. You're waiting for that. But the We Are is the movement, a movement organization. I come from movement politics and organizing and house meetings, and the We Are is about not separating ourselves. I am Marcus. He is Marcus. We are Marcus. And then the next question is, who is Marcus? We can do it again. Second piece, curiosity piquing. We designed it at a 90-second to 2 minutes, knowing that people are only going to pay attention but for so long. And then we kind of push into this turn and talk facilitator piece. That's what we found to be most interesting, or where the curiosity peaks, to use your phrase, at the 7th through 11th grade level. Students are going to engage up until about that point, and then we sort of pull the tech away and we get back to the offline interaction, which for anybody who's interested in sort of saying, oh, well, online mentoring doesn't work, why would we do that? Well, we are not saying as a substitute, but as a complement. We're not trying to replace the human interaction, but I think we have to admit in our culture today that students are engaging with technology just like adults are, right? You're going to pull out, phone addiction is a real thing, and we want to meet users where they are, right, as opposed to where we want them to be. So we want to be able to kind of do both and build those offline skills as well.
Thank you. Any other questions? Go ahead, Alex.
Sure. Once again, my name is Alex. I was curious, not to get too granular, as far as what progress looks like for the students that utilize the platform. Is it like what kind of values are being used? How do you gauge the progress or growth that the students gain from the platform?
So some of the early stage analytics that we're interested in are the depth of the response, the syntax, and then anecdotal conversations with the facilitators. So the check-ins. So we deploy the platform as an enterprise solution to engage with the people who are actually working with the kids on a daily basis. And those outcomes that we talked about earlier about behavior management, referrals, so how students are behaving in the classroom, right? Understanding their EI, right? What does EI look like from an instructor's perspective? And so many of those conversations, emotional intelligence is not something that they even consider with Black boys. The sophistication of that student that they're concerned about, what they don't see, so the access to that conversation, what they don't see is how that student is manipulating the room around him, and whether or not they have the skill to manipulate that in their favor. So one of the early things that students will say is, teachers don't like me. And teachers don't like you? Well, who's responsible for that, right? How do you change that? Does your teacher not understand you? So some of the stuff that you may not even, that we haven't really sort of emphasized enough in our education that I've viewed, and there's data on this and reports as well, is how we label students and how we kind of early on, and as a teacher I knew this as well, you kind of get in a relationship with a student, and the better teachers are the teachers that give permission for the student to be themselves and get out of the way, right? So that's what we're discovering in our client relationship conversations up until this point. I think we'll continue to dig in there, but also on the platform in terms of just what we can see in the response is how students are developing that personal reflection, and also the vision for that is students developing a personal development plan on and offline, right? So I'm now doing this at T0, at T3, March or April. Now the student is opening up more. They're having more of a sophisticated response around, I'm now, okay, my goal is to do my homework. Now I'm struggling with my homework because of these 3 or 4 questions. That's a whole different level of personal analysis, and then emotional intelligence stuff is pretty fascinating too.
Any other questions? I have one question.
Yeah.
Why black men and not also black women?
Oh yeah.
Got to go to the hard questions,
I mean, people are thinking them. So we faced that for a long time. The content is gender inclusive. So I want to open up with that, as is hashtag Black Men Talk Tech. We position in the 24 million followers households in the United States, the students that were coming to me, even in my classroom experience, are coming from those households as well. So the fatherless aspect or male role models and positioning black men, particularly in our country, as sources of community, family, progress overall, and variety of things that they pursue, whether that's being a chef or a UPS delivery guy or a tech entrepreneur or the like. So we want to make sure that we display those images and then drive that narrative and those conversations as well. What we found and what we know is that schools in K through 12 are coming out of the era of not too long ago. It was a profession of majority women. So, and that's fine, and that's okay, and that's good. And we want to include their voices in the conversation. And one of our research advisors is actually, to take it a step further, students with special needs or have been diagnosed that in some way. We want to make our platform accessible to everybody. And we'll continue to figure out better ways to do that, and we'll continue to strive to include diverse voices, including women, on our board and our leadership team and on our all the way up through. And I regularly engage in conversation, with school leaders and behavior specialists and parent coordinators that are women that are doing the work to try to reach girls and boys. Our priority and our target is black and brown boys, and boys of color who don't feel like they can connect in the school setting at the moment. And the third grade test scores are I believe there's a foundation I was on the phone with today said that reading levels at third grade at the third grade is currently being used and has been used to project the number of prison cells.
That's crazy.
Yeah, sorry, it took me a little while to get that out because it's kind of painful concept. Yeah, if you look that up, you'll see third grade reading levels. School to prison pipeline is essentially the narrative there, and they budget accordingly, and that's boys.
That's incredible. So let me ask you one question from the perspective of so this has happened to me, especially here in DC. Sometimes I'll go invited to be in certain rooms and I'm like the only person of color.
Yeah.
You know, and sometimes when I'm in those rooms, I immediately get very suspicious, and I'm like, am I just here because I'm just it's a token, you know?
I can't trust y'all.
Yeah, so I'm like, all right, look, I'm not the smartest guy in the room, so like, you know, there's a lot of other smart, competent people. Maybe this is imposter syndrome, but when I go into a room and there's no people of color, I get very suspicious. I'm like, am I here because they know they have a diversity issue? So for me, like, I haven't really figured this out. It's like, you know, I've never like walked out of the room. I'll just stay there like, all right, I'm here and make the best out of it. But sometimes I feel that. And I guess my question is like, how do you know in terms of representation, if you're having authentic representation, or is it just sort of like people kind of doing CYA, I guess, or something, you know?
In what setting? You mean like?
This is in a setting of just, you know, in the startup community where, you know, for example, like, and you've been around circles in DC, and sometimes like, you know, sometimes it's very diverse and very representative, and then sometimes it's not so much.
Yeah.
And, you know, you can see that with teams where, you know, some companies will put up like a staff photo and it's like, and you know, it doesn't represent Arlington. You're like, I hang out in Arlington. I was like, it's not what Arlington looks like.
Yeah.
You know, and so I'm just curious to see like, you know, and for me, like, I get very like, I don't know how to bring up the conversation. You know what I mean? Like, you know, like.
Well, one of the things I've found in moving through majority non-people of color spaces, you know, I look over my shoulder and usually a camera is stalking me because they want to take that photo.
Yeah.
They want to see the guy who's like smiling, he's non-threatening, you know. Like,
exactly.
You know, and I go through that narrative. I think the best thing to do is turn down the volume. She gets it. What?
No, go ahead.
Yeah, that's common. As like I was saying, turn down the volume, and that, you know, I'll go back to my pitch about create your own space. Create your own space. I keep feeling uncomfortable. I have people in my circles throughout. I've worked at a couple of different places, and prior to creating my own, and before I started creating my own, I started to focus on working at places where it actually was reflective of my interests, and I didn't feel that way. And I had the privilege of working at a school that was 90-something% people who lived in the community and diverse. We wanted to figure out how to have people of color teach kids of color, and it was like radical. They don't want you to do this, and I was like, well, I guess, you know, I can understand why. I can understand why, because we're at a point, I think, where you can buy black, you can build black, you can recruit black, and the numbers, the 83% of non-people of color leading tech firms throughout the country. Well, here we come. Here we come. We can figure out how to build spaces that we feel really comfortable in, and then also open up the tent and say, "Hey, join us." Right? This is not an exclusive setting, but we are here. We are talented. We have great ideas. We have skills that are transferable across sectors.
Great.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah. And check out We Are Marcus for opportunities. If you have public health skills, or you've been you're a neuroscientist or a substance abuse disorder expert, you're a social media expert, we're going to be launching an intern position pretty quickly. If you're a conscious developer, we're building out our tech team. Get involved now. We're positioning ourselves to go after great opportunities for partnership and funding. And I will not do it alone. We are Marcus. This is bigger than Christopher King. This is bigger than Gustavus Shaw and Jamal Mosley, and my guy Karam. We got to figure out how to help him.
No, definitely. I think it's important to continue to build these networks up, and I've seen it as an entrepreneur. So the network effect is so incredibly important. It's one of those things that when I had mentors like you to really build a network, and I'm like, what does that mean? Like, you just go and give business cards to people. And, after a while, like, you get better and better at it. And now that I'm really kind of into that mix, I'm like, wow, it's really important. And I say that as a South Asian male, wouldn't be in this country if it wasn't for the struggle of the civil rights movement, the struggle that African Americans went through, and all that pushing for equality that happened. My father came here almost immediately after the immigration laws were changed, thanks in large part to the Civil Rights Act. And so like everybody's in it together. And what's even fascinating is like, one of the most influential figures on me was Martin Luther King Jr. And, and a lot of his ideas that he had developed from his mentor who had gone to India and studied under Gandhi. And so I find that very kind of like the circle just goes around, in terms of like how we can all help and benefit each other. And I think in this country at this time, like America has a very checkered history about a lot of issues. And we do great things and we do terrible things at the same time. Yeah. And right now it's like this schizophrenia, I feel like almost, where it's like so much progress is being made, but it also sometimes feels like we're going behind. And I'm, we're in DC, so I feel that very acutely. I haven't fully adjusted to the political reality sometimes.
We're in it.
But I feel like and you get overwhelmed. You're like, what can I do as an individual? And how do I raise my kids in this environment? What can I do in my local community? And I realized as an entrepreneur, you can do a lot. Yeah. You can really have an impact in local communities, and you can have these conversations and stuff that people feel uncomfortable about having. And when we think of issues of diversity, like people don't think of DC for some reason. They think like, oh, that's an issue with like in the Midwest and in some of these corporate settings, like this Papa John's or whatever. But over here, and I've seen it in our local communities, like there's just a lot of work that needs to get done, especially in the tech community. Where I don't see the representation that I saw growing up in in New York, and I'm like, okay, I know this area has a lot of different people. You can go to the restaurants. There's a lot of different ethnic restaurants, a lot of different community restaurants. So when it comes to the tech community, that representation isn't really there. So I want to close on one final question, and I guess is like, what's your number one tip as a mentor to someone that is looking to get involved and build themselves up in their professional and entrepreneurial community?
Number one tip. Wasn't expecting that. I was caught up in your immigrant story.
Yeah.
First, thank you for sharing that. That's the first I've heard. And that vulnerability is what I just get motivated by it. And I'm sure your listeners do as well. And for a man of color, and like we have to be just like Black women in many ways have to put on our armor and our mask every time we go into settings where we are maybe the only person in the room. And so thank you. Like that's super powerful, and we have a lot in common. Across Black, brown, people of color, however we want to label it. We're out here mission focused and have skills to bring to bear, and have origin stories that are really important. But to answer your question, the number one tip I would say is believe in yourself, and bet on yourself when no one else will. I in my hustle of building my organization and keeping morale on my team, I'll drive Lyft because I want to make sure that I'm one, making money on a daily basis, two, back to two, meeting people and listening and practicing the art of listening, and I believe in that. And one of the guys that got in my car one day, he very much reminded me of my father, who has gone through a lot as an entrepreneur recently. He's been a contractor with the DMV for the last 30 years, and he's weathered the storm of the recession, and you understand that hit construction pretty hard. And he has gone through issues with housing and different things. And we've, he told me, just like this other guy who told me who got in the car, he was like, he talked about being a single father, the guy in the car, but he talked about betting on himself and nobody else believed in him. And he doesn't know my story, right? This is my Brian Copeland moment. You're Brian. I'm gonna cry up here. But that's what you get to know who you are pretty quickly in those moments of discomfort, where your vision is still evolving, or your vision is firmly cemented, and you know exactly where you are and where you're going to be. And that's amazing. But the conviction is something that even that high school guidance counselor couldn't shake me, right? I was
So
like,
you believed in yourself the entire time then?
I in that moment I did. My mom had my back, cursed out the guidance counselor. but I also, like other points in my life, tears were shed, you know, and there were times where I got on the phone with my mentor and cried, my eyes out, and he'll talk to me, be like, you know, he may not talk about it because he protects me in that way. But I'll talk about it today. That, you know, there was moments where I was just like, man, this is not going to work. And he was like, you'll be fine. But you got to get it out. And you got to get up, and you get tested by your when you get up. It's not that you get knocked down. For everything that Karan mentioned at the beginning of this, 98% no's, 2% yes. You don't need to be right every time. You just need to be right one time. There are fellowships that I've applied for over and over and over again. And I say to myself, the data indicates that you got to apply at least 3-4 times. Okay, there were some things where I hit it on the first time. It was based on relationship of them seeing me struggle in these other places and still getting up in front of you and smiling and saying, we're going to do this, we're going to do this, we're going to do this. That's what a founder looks like. If you could take one thing from this, you get up and you're seeing a founder who is continually believing in what he's doing. I am purpose driven. I know exactly what my bottom line is, and it's impact. Everything else will fall into place.
That's great. Well, thank you, Chris, for coming on tonight and speaking to people in the audience as well as online. I'm incredibly grateful to have you as a friend. I think the work you're doing with We Are Marcus is very important, and the Black Men Talk Tech, you're creating a space and a conversation on a subject that's very timely, it's very important, and it will have, I think, a tremendous impact here in the DC area. Could you just one last time mention the next event?
Yeah, March 29th, 6 to 8 at Google DC, 25 Mass Ave, 9th floor. You can register for the event. Please register. Eventbrite, search on Eventbrite, Black Men Talk Tech, it'll come up. Register, donate to make sure that we can have events like this in the future. This is a series of events that's going to roll out. So we're excited to continue to do these and create these spaces.
And if you're a school district or you want to become a mentor, how do you sign up on We Are Marcus?
Yeah, if you're a school district, request a demo on the wearemarcus.com website. And you can also book time on my calendar to discuss the mentoring onboarding process. And I'll shoot you a link, and you can add to our carousel. We're rolling out shoot days. It's going to be really exciting for you to get involved.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Chris, for coming on the show. Thank you all for coming in for the live audience. Thank you for everybody coming in online. And hopefully this will be up on YouTube as soon as we're kind of done with it. That's pretty much it. Everybody have a good evening. There we go.